No, you do it way better.
Oh, that wasn't a good pop.
You know, we're sitting here in the Austin Film Society Cinema, which
Yes.
is the evolution of a group you started in 1985. Your latest film will have its Texas premiere here. After all these years, is that still surreal to have all these elements converge, or does it just feel like this natural
Wonderful.
progression?
It's something you dream about and work toward. You know, it's always kind of great when you sit back and go, "Oh, wow, that's all happened." It's a nonprofit that a lot of people work really hard for very little to make this happen. So that's always special.
You know, you personally have had such an incredible impact on the Austin creative community. All those years ago when you left home to start making films, how'd you choose Austin?
Oh gosh, I didn't go that far. I grew up in Huntsville. How does anyone choose Austin? You have friends who go to college here, you go visit them, you go to Barton Springs, you go out to the Continental Club, or and you kind of go, I could do this.
Life's pretty nice here.
I could do this. I just felt I could make it happen in Austin, or that was just where I wanted to be.
The Film Society came around just a few years later. What was the
Yeah.
impetus for that at that time?
I was just seeing a bunch of movies. You know, at that point I was living near University of Texas and going to all the movies on campus, and that was great. But I noticed they were showing a lot of the same ones over and over for classes. And I was like, well, what about the other zillion films that, and I just in love with cinema and trying to make something happen. And we were successful from the very beginning. We showed some films at the old Dolby Theater on the Drag.
Oh, I love
It was a big hit right off the bat. So Austin had this, obviously a huge music culture, big literary culture, but the film culture there was a lot of interest there, but it hadn't really been galvanized. So I think we just stepped into a gap that was there.
Yeah.
But then obviously, if you look at the Austin film scene now with all of our film festivals and everything we got going on, clearly the population is supporting it.
As you talk about that time period, the freedom of the 80s and early 90s as you were making Slacker, the freedom that Austin gave you, what would that look like today?
The city is much more vibrant now. There's much going on, so much more going on. The 80s was kind of there was a depression basically, economically, which was when you have nothing. It was kind of great. Everything was cheap, but there wasn't that much going on, unfortunately. So I do prefer the Austin of now, just because there's so much more vibrancy, and I think people making things happen. To be someone who had some ambition trying to make things happen, it was kind of frustrating back then, where now there's so many like-minded people who are like, yeah, let's do it, whether it's starting a company or whatever people are doing. Restaurants, I think a lot of doers here, that are trying to make things happen.
When you talk about that love of cinema, at what point in your life did you go from watching movies and just enjoying them to thinking, oh, I want to be the filmmaker?
That's an interesting moment. I always was a writer since I could remember, 4th, 5th grade. I was always writing short stories and thought of myself as a writer, but I hadn't really discovered film. But once I did, I kind of first thought, oh, I could write films, but then I realized I had them in my head, like I could see all the shots and had some visual thing going. The early 20s, I've discovered the medium. So from that point on, I just bought a bunch of equipment and did it. I just didn't really know where it was going to end up, but I felt that was my medium.
Yeah.
So, and once you make that leap, you don't see films quite the same way. The fact that you could make a film was so far from my consciousness. Until I was well into teenage, it just wasn't something anyone did. So it was a huge leap to get into that area. Amazed, thrilled, whatever, to be one. When Slacker came out, this is something we did locally. The fact that it would be taken serious nationwide or be seen anywhere outside of maybe a video we were handing around was just mind-boggling to myself and everyone involved in that movie.
One thing I'm always just amazed by is your ability to capture these moments with so much emotion and understand the human experience in a way that relates to so many people. As the audience is watching it, I'm still processing Boyhood. 3 years later, I'm still thinking about how is there such a sense of knowing? It's almost ineffable that way to connect everyone. What do you think it is that enables you to be able to kind of understand some of those feelings and translate them on a screen for people?
I don't know. Film's a really powerful medium. I think it can capture that. It's a nice emotional transference, I think, from the image to the viewer. So I've always kind of played around with that, or pushed that, I think, in storytelling. It's a fascinating art form.
Yeah.
And that encompasses everything, you know. There's technically and spiritually, emotionally. Yeah, that's what keeps me busy, keeps me excited. But I'm always trying to make something that feels real.
Yeah.
You know, like this is very, you know, it's how these three guys are kind of processing the world around them.
Yeah, this latest film, why this story? Why did you want to bring that to the screen for people?
It felt very relevant. These two wars, you know, the Iraq War, this takes place in '03, versus, you know, the Vietnam War. They're kind of these vets. So I wanted it to be a very realistic depiction of what they went through. And it's not like a big story. They weren't at the My Lai massacre. They weren't generals. They're just the guys who in the trenches. And the movie's really all about them and one of their sons, you know, Carell's son, has been killed, in all the notions of patriotism, duty, honor, all that, and truth, I guess, is hovering around it. So it was a really deep area of exploration.
And the way that you kind of weave humor into the story is really interesting. Can you speak a bit about what role that plays? Yeah,
the guys, it sounds funny when you say what the movie's about, but then you say, oh, it's kind of a comedy too. It's like, what? But if you really think about it, you know, like, we've all been at funerals and really sad times where people find humor, or you tell funny stories about people. Humor can be very healing, you know, in the bad times. So it's important. It's how we kind of persevere and find some kind of commonality. The little levity isn't bad. I never trusted art that's too serious. You know, if it's a serious subject treated too serious by the people around it, I just don't believe that. Because I think, oh, the worse things are, the more people are trying to counter that with humor and something else.
Yeah. Looking back and seeing how far you've come on this journey, all these amazing things have come from it. How would you advise someone who's kind of beginning their filmmaking experience or their creative project in general to stay the course?
Well, whatever the art form is, or whatever you're trying to communicate in the world, or whatever you're doing. Yeah, it's going to take longer than you think. And, you know, you just have to work really hard and work twice as hard as you thought you had to, and stick with it twice as long as you think you had. All these things are little litmus test weed outs.
Yeah, I agree.
For everything, you know, nothing's easy, so nothing's given to you, you know, particularly in the arts. You know, it's a pretty rarefied world, and so many people want to do it, so what's going to differentiate you?
That's great advice.
Got to have something to say, too.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Okay.
Congratulations on this latest film as well.
Nice Congratulations on the show.
Thank you. That truly means the world coming from you.
Happy for you.